The societal and regulatory issues facing the agricultural sector have been escalating and are relentless. The demands of production and cost of food, and of course society's perception of agriculture, have been a growing burden. These complex, contrary, large and evolving issues are truly wicked problems. Agriculture needs to be involved in the issues and to be leading development of the solutions, not just reacting, in part to maintain and build our public trust. Joining us now is 2019 Nuffield Scholar Ben Hancock to discuss his report from this year. Now, Ben, firstly, it is a really big part of your life to take a year out to travel around the world. How did you manage all that, and why was it so important for you to do a Nuffield?
I suppose growing up with some people that have done the Nuffield and been aware of it, it's actually been on my radar for quite some time, and it just I was at a point in terms of career, and I'd been a couple of years out of my PhD. That it was a time that suited. There were a couple of little things, my house settling took a little bit longer, and they ended up happening while I was overseas. But had family support, and I worked with Beef and Lamb, and they were quite supportive as well.
So, what led you to choose this particular topic?
Yeah, I'd been looking at a few. Well, through my work, it just felt like there was one after the other. There was the Billion Trees policy, the regional environmental, the different regional environmental frameworks, the alternative proteins, the discussions about how relevant agriculture was to New Zealand's economy and society. Fresh water was essential to the general election, and that was when I was starting out considering the Nuffield Scholarship. And since then, we've had the Zero Carbon Bill, Central Fresh Water, National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity, and there's a soils one on the way. So it just felt like a tsunami, and it was a little bit like whack-a-mole, we were reacting to this all the time, and I was not sick of it, but how could we get in front of this instead of reacting to it? And I mean, it's always going to be all these policies and these issues. The intentions behind these virtuous, aspirational objectives, and because of the role, as we've seen recently, how essential agriculture is to society and our well-being, it's always going to have a place in the wider conversation for society. So it was how can I find a way to get ahead of the curve?
Yeah, and of course this matrix and the reflective equilibrium that you describe in your report. Can you sort of explain what bioethic tools mean and how we can apply that to rural leadership? Yeah,
so, well, I suppose I'll going back a step. I was looking at, across different sectors, of ways of picking up issues before they become an issue. And I've, got talked with Amazon economists and finance sector and think tanks, and it felt like it was almost like you're trying to pick the winner. And we don't have that luxury of failures because we've burned through that public trust. And I happened to be at a UC Davis conference with Hamish Marr, one of the other scholars, and bioethics came up in one of the discussions by Dr. Anne Barnhill from Johns Hopkins, and I thought, well, this is a really useful way of framing up the issue. And I went to see her at Johns Hopkins, and more we talked about it, actually by identifying what the values, the viewpoints by the range of stakeholders held on these different issues, you can, and more going a step further, you understand the values and you actually start to create an idea of what the cause or why these viewpoints are displayed or come at the sector. And so the ethical matrix is a foundational tool in bioethics, and it's designed to take in the range of values, because values or views the views are akin to ethics. And so the ethical matrix is designed to inform the decision makers, but it doesn't arrive at the decision. But experts are involved in the process as they're a resource to inform the viewpoints and of the different parties or where it's required. And because you gain the range of views, you can identify those potential points of conflict, where the values diverge, but also where perhaps the values are aligned, but the perspectives on the stances that different groups take might diverge, and then this identifies a communication issue.
Yeah, and then how do you take it another step from there in terms of the systems thinking of those decision makers to have a collaborative outcome when there's multiple different agendas at play?
Yeah, of the three tools that I dug into, the reflective equilibrium is more suited to arrive at those decisions. And so this takes three elements. It's a back and forth between the intuition or that expected or assumed position at the start, and then it's tested against the facts, the relevant facts to this. That's informed by the peer-reviewed literature, and then these are put in against the principles or the values of society, and these values of society can be informed by, say, another tool as the ethical matrix. And then, but as you go through each step, it might inform or shift the positions, and so it is a reiterative process, and you eventually you come to a stable point, the equilibrium, and that informs your decision. And an example of that is, say, around animal welfare, where there might be a policy or a public view or position. That starts off as your intuition point. Then this intuition is tested against the facts, the research, and then when it comes to principles, and this might sound like the less tangible element of these three parts of the reflective equilibrium, but we already have our 5 freedoms in the Animal Welfare Act, and so that becomes your principles that you can test it against, and that might re-inform what that intuition, that starting point, has evolved because it's been informed by those other two parts, and then you go through this process again.
Ben, it all sounds very too practical, to be honest. I mean, in a perfect world, it sounds like that certainly should be the way that we make all our decisions. And I just want to know, you're employed currently by Beef and Lamb New Zealand as a senior insights analyst. What sort of ways have you been able to apply your learnings in your industry role?
Yeah, there's one project that I'm working on, and it's looking at potential, the sort of looking at the future of the red meat sector and where some of the levers might be, and that we want to include the different aspects of the supply chain and the consumers in that. I've been, just before lockdown, had a quick chat with our analyst that looks after animal welfare, and so we are looking at exploring some potential issues or going through some of the practices, because originally some of these tools were designed to scout new technologies such as genetic modification. But so we can go through and do a stock take of the practices on farms and potential new ones. And one of the big influences on my Nuffield project was Professor Matthias Kaiser from the University of Bergen. And he's actually in New Zealand at the moment. He got caught out with the lockdown, and he hasn't been able to get back to Norway. But he's here working with, and he's been working in the field of bioethics and has been quite instrumental in the ethical matrix and the ethical Delphi. But he's been working with Professor Peter Gluckman on the KOI2 Centre for Informed Futures, and so it becomes potential for using these sort of ideas for, say, the RMA. That's been quite topical lately, and if we can, still account for all the range of views held on a topic, but not necessarily have to go through every man, woman, and child sort of having and being involved in the process, but they're still
feeling heard
in the process. Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, some wonderful insights there from Ben Hancock, 2019 Nuffield Scholar. If you'd like to read into more depth, the full report that Ben has put is on ruralleaders.co.nz, Rural Leadership, Taming the Wicked Problems, it's called. And I understand, Ben, on the 2nd of June, you can tune into a webinar with yourself and, I haven't got it in front of me, the other scholar?
Yep. Oh, no, there's an odd number of us, so I'm flying solo on that
Are
day.
you? Okay, 2nd of June, head to ruralleaders.co.nz to register for the webinar to then be able to have a in-depth live Q&A with Ben on that topic.
This is Sarah's Country.